Boy, what a scorcher. Jay, they told me I'd be in the shade. Well, I am Perry Johnson, and I am running for President of the United States. But I have to tell you that you could never vote for anyone without knowing something about them. And I might as well let you know, I am extremely conservative, so if you want to throw stones at me, you can. I am pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, anti-woke, anti-China, and by the way, I think it's ridiculous that we are sending $113 billion to the Ukraine when we're going broke here. Now, when I'm elected, though, there's some things that I will do immediately. One is my 2-cent plan. Right now, I believe we are going broke. In fact, let's face it, maybe we are broke. We are now $33 trillion in debt. In my book, I say 32, but we've already gained another trillion. Now, what does that really mean? That means that each and every one of you, every family here, is spending $610 a month on the interest of our debt. $610 a month. You know, they're talking about cutting Social Security by $17,000 to $23,000. Why? Because the government is spending so much of your money. And when they do that, they create a problem for everyone in America. And let's face it, it's hard to even relate to 33 trillion, so I'm going to try to put it in perspective. Let's suppose that you and your wife or you and your spouse get together and you decide that you are going to look at your finances. And you may take in $70,000 a year. But you said, honey, we are $450,000 in debt because that's what we owe on our credit cards. $450,000 and you bring in $70,000 a year, so maybe we have to cut back. And you know what? We're going to cut back this year, and we're only going to spend $91,000. Now you think about how absurd that is. Well, that's exactly what's happening to the government. They take in $4.9 trillion in taxes, and they are now $33 trillion in debt, and they are going to go more in debt every year for the next 10 years. Now, I wrote a book, 2 Cents to Save America. The plan is very simple. We're going to freeze the budget and cut 2 cents out of every dollar of discretionary spending. I've spent my entire life bringing quality and efficiency to companies, and now I want to bring it to the federal government. The second thing I'm going to do, I know you're not going to like it, but I'm going to shut down the Department of Education. Right now, I want everybody to realize that only 8% of all the money that's collected goes to grades K through 12. So what I'm going to do is get rid of 4,300 of those 4,400 people, and we're going to then ship the money directly to the states, and they distribute it. Now, I will tell you that I know you can't ever vote for anyone without understanding where they come from, and I need you to understand a little bit about me. I'm a guy that grew up in a small town, Dalton, Illinois. My dad was a pilot in World War II. My mom was a nurse in the Army WACs, and they met at the New Year's Eve party, the biggest break of my life. And they love this country, and they taught me from the beginning of time that the greatest gift you can be given is to be born an American. And boy, I believe that. Now, we didn't have a lot of money, but I worked in the steel mill and got through college. Undergraduate school, not so bad. Graduate school, I was getting eviction notices on pretty much a regular basis. But I eventually got through that too. And I got a job in the auto industry in the 80s when they were struggling because Japan had come in with tremendous quality and they were killing us. Because they used to have teams of people at the end of the line inspecting the product, and if it wasn't any good, they would either throw it out or rework it. Well, I thought I knew how to solve the problem. My background was mathematics, and I knew they were now kicking me out of Vegas, so I could not play blackjack anymore, and I knew a way to solve this problem. At least I thought I did, and I started my first company. What I did was introduce statistical process control. And we started in the beginning of the operation, and you know what? We ironed out all the variation, and in 4 or 5 years, we had the best quality in the world. And I said, why not quality as a way of life? And I wrote a book on ISO 9000, the quality standard. And now Perry Johnson registrars and Perry Johnson Laboratory Accreditation do business in 61 countries around the world. And I want to bring quality and efficiency to the federal government. I'm going to ask you, do you think the federal government now has quality and efficiency? In fact, I am probably the worst guy in the world for Washington, and I know they hate me. We do have 52,000 donors. They thought they were going to keep me off the stage, but they're not going to. They don't include me in the polls, but we still managed to get several polls where we were over 1%. So the bottom line is I will be on that stage. And I want to tell you that I have a Big and Rich concert tomorrow, right here. It starts, the gates open at 5 o'clock. Big and Rich goes on around 7 o'clock. And you guys are all welcome to the Big and Rich concert. It's at the water park, and I think you'll love it. I will tell you that we have a phenomenal country, and I don't think anybody realizes how great it is. Because unlike any other country in the world, we literally have the most upwardly mobile society the world has ever known. And I want you to understand that we really started with just an idea, because you had a handful of people that came over to this country because they wanted religious freedom. They wanted the right to worship the way that they wanted to. And then they said that they were going to have an experiment, create a country that was by the people, for the people. And they had one basic theme: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And with that theme, we ended up becoming an amazing country. To achieve that, we had to fight the most powerful army in the history of the world. We had to do it without muskets. We weren't even allowed guns, but we did it. And we defeated the most powerful army in the history of the world because we had that fire inside us. It has been that fire inside of us that has made us the most amazing country the world has ever known. And the world looks at us and they says, wow, amazing. You have Edison, you have Ford, you have Vanderbilt, you have Carnegie. You have the greatest inventors of all time right here in America. We became the greatest country the world has ever known. And by golly, we're going to keep it that way. And I will take any questions at this point. Fire away. Well, the single most important thing that we have in the United States is defense. In fact, you have to realize that the only reason the tax bill was passed was in order to provide for the national defense. In the early 1900s, I think it was 1907, 1908, we introduced the tax again, and we were taxing at the rate of 3%. What happened is we had to do that because we needed defense. Defense was never more important than it is today. Now, I want to tell you what's going on. We wrote a check for $900 billion in interest. For the first time in history, we are spending more money on defense, on interest than we are on defense. It's never happened before. And right now, with the introduction of AI, we better be on top of everything, because what is so important is that our technology in defense has to make sense. They did an audit of the Pentagon on the defense budget. They did 5 audits, they failed 5 audits. Their budget was $760 billion. They could not account for $220 billion of it. They don't know where it went. So it's not only important that we have defense, it's important that we make sure that we put it in the right area, because it is so critical that we stay on top of technology. If we do not, with the introduction of AI and AI into the defense operations, we could find ourselves in a very difficult situation. And right now, China is our biggest problem. China has an economy of 20 trillion. In 1998, their economy was 1,077 billion. And they are our biggest fear right now. So let us recognize that defense is the single most important element and the single most important responsibility of the federal government, without a doubt. But we have to make sure we spend it in the right area. Building a bunch of tanks that we're never going to use doesn't make sense. When we send $113 billion over to the Ukraine, we have to have an objective. What's our goal? What are we trying to achieve? Let's lay out some objectives. And shouldn't we get Europe involved? After all, they're adjacent to Ukraine. And it's silly for us to be in a position where we can't get Europe involved in trying to defend the rest of the free world like we do. And that's what we have to do. Any other questions? Yes? Yes.
Why are we sending fucking loads of money to Ukraine and not doing something in our United States to build up the structure? Ukraine is they can't even join the UN, right? So
Correct.
what can you do to stop that money going to Ukraine?
I would have stopped it right now.
But how?
You don't allow it. You know, it's very interesting. You noticed how Biden has all of the executive orders to send money over? You're allowed to have an executive order to not fund it. I say we do just the opposite. Let's stop this craziness, because sending $113 billion over to the Ukraine, we don't even know where the money's going. It's nuts. Any other questions? Yes.
Iowa's an agriculture state. How do you plan to support agriculture and biofuels?
Well, actually, agriculture is probably the breadbasket of America. It's the key to our growth. One thing you have to understand is that we can't allow people to buy land in Iowa or the rest of the country, but China is actually buying land across the United States, even though we can't buy any land in China. And we have to recognize that the most important thing is for us to make sure that we can provide for ourselves. Pay attention to the fact that a Chinese company acquired Smithfield. That is the largest producer of pork in the entire world, and yet it's owned by a Chinese company, and Smithfield is right here in Iowa. So we have to recognize there are so many things that can be done. What about ethanol? Why don't we produce more ethanol? Ethanol, for example, is very good for the environment, and we actually can lower the cost of gas. We should not be paying this astronomical amount for gas. What happened here is that when Biden took office, he decided to stop all drilling on federal lands. We had to take him to court because there was a treaty signed that said they have to provide the drilling on federal lands. So now he does provide it, but we have the lowest amount of drilling taking place of any time since Truman. And the reason that you're spending so much for gas right now is because of the administration. They have done two things. One, they have reduced the production of oil. Two, they put all these regulations on, which made it impossible for the small producer to ever make any money. And why shouldn't we be producing as much ethanol as possible? That's what I say. Yes.
Do you have an opinion on whether the federal government should own any land in America? Or perhaps they should sell it off to people, the highest bidders, and let the private free market take care of our land?
Well,
Maybe they do better.
actually, in the free market aspect, part of the thing that's going to happen when I enter office is that I will try to privatize as many things as possible. You realize when we privatize things, we force competition. We force people to have better quality and better efficiency, or they can't survive. However, the government is still going to have to own some land. So you can't say the government can't own any land. What we do have to do, though, is recognize that we have huge problems in our entire industry. Let's take medicine, for example. How many people think that medical care is too expensive? Do you know that when I started my company in 1987, I was paying $18 a month for all my people, and it was a $100 deductible. Now that same insurance is $533 a month with literally a $2,500 deductible. And the reason for that is that we have allowed our cost for medical care to go through the roof. We need to have competition across state lines for all insurance carriers. And as I write in my book, we have to have transparency. We must know what we're paying. Now, I write in my book that the idiocy with which our system operates. Do you know the amount that's paid for a particular procedure depends more on the insurance carrier than it does the hospital or the procedure? And the example that I use is the brain scan. In Sonoma Health, one insurance carrier would pay $6,700 for a brain scan, another would pay $1,200, and if you paid cash, it was $450. But I'm going to ask each and every one of you, how many people really know what they're paying for any procedure when you go in? We don't know, because they don't tell us. Well, they have to, because if they don't, our cost for medical care will go through the roof. And by the way, it's gone up 5 times faster than the rate of inflation. And the two major things that have gone up exponentially are tuition, college tuition, and medical care. And we have to address both of those issues. Now, let me talk about college tuition for a minute because I want to tell you the absurdity. My oldest son, 5 minutes left. My oldest son, Perry, started Michigan State this year. Now, in 1979, the cost to go to Michigan State was $25 a credit hour. If it had gone up at the rate of inflation, it would now be $100 a credit hour, but it isn't. It's $500 a credit hour. It's gone up 5 times the rate of inflation, and that's something that we have to address. Now, what I would do there is very simply change the way we're doing things. The government passed a law in 1965 that said that they're going to guarantee a student loan regardless of the amount for any college student. And that's when the overall cost soared. And the colleges were getting a floodgate of money. So I'm going to do to the colleges just what I'm going to do to the federal government. They have to freeze their tuition, and they have to cut 2% every year, or they do not qualify for student loans. Any other questions? Yes? Can't hear. Oh, digital currency. Digital currency is, we're not ready for it. I'm going to tell you why. We have so many different areas that are getting hacked right now that it really is frightening. Realize that Bank of America's been hacked, the Pentagon's been hacked, hospitals are getting hacked on a regular basis, and we can't even control that no matter what we do. Kroll is probably number one in controlling, but you can buy Microsoft, which is supposed to protect you, but you'll notice all of these organizations have Microsoft, and they're still getting hacked. So the bottom line is that is too dangerous at this point. We can't have it. Any other questions? Okay. And I want to tell you something. And I want you to understand the theme. When I first started my company, I had a fellow by the name of Ed Deming who referred the government to me, and a guy by the name of Joe Duran that referred the government to me. And I was implementing statistical process control at the time. So I had one employee, Donna Avery, in a 110 square foot office, and they wanted to come in and see me with their team of people. Well, I knew that wasn't going to work, so I rented an office in the town center, and I got some used furniture for approximately $1,440, dividers, chairs, and then I had some of my friends act like workers. So when they came in there, they then asked me what it was going to cost to implement statistical process control in the Naval Supply Center in San Diego. Well, I didn't know. My biggest contract had been with Microsoft at the time. So I took a guess, $100,000. They said, there's no way you're going to do it for only $100,000. What is it? Finally, the price came up to $400,000. And you know what? I ended up losing money on that contract. Why? Because the government was so inefficient that they'd be canceling all these meetings, and meeting after meeting would get rescheduled. We cannot run an organization like that. We have to change the way in which the government does business. Do you think it's reasonable to hire 87,000 extra IRS agents to go out? Come on. What about the border? Shouldn't we finish the wall? Come on. Let's finish the wall. We have 20,000 people out there. Let's let those 20,000 people that are out there do their job. We have the laws in place to stop the border crossing. It really hits home because I have 3 young kids. You know, fentanyl can be put into anything. It can be put into a cigarette. And it comes over the border, and you have an increase in heroin use, cocaine use, and all various types of drugs. I say we stop it, and we stop it today. In the meantime, I want everyone here to recognize that they can go to that concert, enjoy life. I'd love to see you big and rich. It is going to be a ball. Now, it was originally intended for all of my donors, so I guess in theory you're supposed to donate, but I do have 52,000 donors. I don't need more, but go to Big and Rich Concert, see one of the people over here, the Perry Johnson people. If you see anyone, they'll give you tickets. Otherwise, come on in. It is going to be a ball. And I want everyone to recognize that we still have the greatest country the world's ever known, and we are going to keep it that way. You got it.